What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Troy Bilt lawnmower, and the problem is that it was put up last year, but now that several months have passed, it will not start. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this mower. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. So the story is that this mower was used last year during the mowing season. However, near the end of the season, a lawn service came in to finish the rest of the season. That means this mower hasn't been used in several months, and unfortunately it was put away with ethanol gas in the tank, so now it won't start. So I'm quite certain that it will start up and run. We just have a clogged carburetor problem, but what if we didn't know this information? So instead, I think it'd be safer if we tried to figure out the problem without any history instead, because it'd be the worst case scenario. Now before we try and start this engine, I want to check the oil level and its condition. Just in case we do get this engine started, I don't want to run the engine with low to no oil and damage the engine, which I hate to say has happened to me before. Now the oil looks okay, but there's way too much oil in there, so we may have to at least change the oil just to put the right amount of oil back in. Now while we're here, we also need to see if there's any gas in the tank, which there is, but I'm going to leave this gas in the tank because it's the gas that was in the tank when they couldn't get it to start. So as you can see, it didn't even try and start. So now I want to check to see if we have spark by using a spark checker. Now you can buy these online for just a few dollars, and to use it, just install it in line with a spark plug, pull the rope, and watch for an orange glow in the tester. Now I've stopped the video so I can show you that there is an orange glow in the tester, and that means we have spark from the ignition system. If your tester didn't have an orange glow, then you might have a bad ignition module, or it may still be grounded when it's not supposed to be. Next, I want to put some gas into the carburetor's throat and do a test start. And luckily for us, it started and ran for a second, which is great news. That means we have enough compression from the engine for it to run. What if it didn't start though? In that situation, the engine might be worn out, and the easiest way for me to find out is to use a compression tester. These can be bought online for less than $20 and will measure how much pressure your engine can make on the compression stroke. A high reading over 100 psi is preferable, and the higher the better. And of course, the lower the reading means the engine is worn out to some extent. I do not want to see a reading less than 50 psi because that means we have a serious problem on our hands. To use the tester, remove the spark plug, install the hose, and then pull the rope several times. So the reading is about 70 psi, which sounds bad. However, this engine might have a compression release to make pulling the rope a lot easier, so the actual reading could be a lot higher. Now, I wish the reading was higher, but at least I know the engine will start and run at this reading. Next, I want to drain the gas out of the tank and examine its condition. So it hasn't finished draining yet, but from what I can see, this gas is fresh by its smell and color. Now the darker the color, the older the gas, and this one is very fresh, so I don't think stale gas or water contaminated gas is keeping this engine from starting. So the next step is to remove the carburetor and see if it's clogged, but I'm going to do something different this time. I'm going to remove the engine cover and the recoil to make removing the carburetor a lot easier, and the reason for that is the short fuel line. Now when the tank is off, I'll explain more in detail. Now you don't have to do this part, but the risk is very high that something might break, and that's going to cost you a lot of money. Once the recoil is off, we can now remove the air filter cover and the air filter, followed by the screws that hold the filter base to the carburetor. After the filter base is out of the way, take note of how the choke linkage and flap are arranged, because this is where things could go wrong. So what I'm moving is the lever for the choke, and as you can see, it's spring-loaded to stay closed till this other lever, which is for the thermostat, to override it when the engine gets hot and doesn't need the extra fuel. Now to remove the pivot arm for the thermostat override, just pry it at the bottom and just be very careful as it is just plastic. After that, we can then remove the clamp on the fuel line closer to the tank. Then we can lift the tank off of its mount and then disconnect the fuel line from the tank. So the reason why I removed the fuel tank is that the fuel port is about twice as long as it needs to be, and with the short fuel line, this port has a good chance of breaking. And I hate to say it, but if you break this port and need to replace the tank, It's 1/4 the price of a brand new comparable mower, so I think it's worth a little extra time to remove the carburetor safely. Now once the carb is off the engine, remove the 2 screws holding the bowl to the rest of the plastic carb, and then pry the bowl away using a flat blade screwdriver. And after removing the bowl, what we see inside are little white particles, which is what's left over from ethanol gas after evaporating in the fuel system. Now I also want to see if there's any water at the bottom of the bowl, so I'll just pour it onto this wood table and see if any water puddles on the gas. And after a few seconds, I don't see any water puddling, so there wasn't any water in the bowl either. Now this is the fuel jet, and it's what usually clogs up and keeps the engine from starting. Now you could just run a wire through it and call it a day, but I want to remove the cartridge since we've come this far. After carefully prying it out, I'm going to break it down even further so we can check the emulsion tube section for any blockages. Just be very careful since these parts are plastic. All of the parts can be bent or broken. Now all the larger holes look clear, but I still want to run a wire through it, and if you have some compressed air, it would probably help as well. Otherwise a can of carb cleaner works well too. So I'm finally going to clear the fuel jet with the wire, and after that I also want to use one of my micro drill bits to make sure it's as clear as it can be. You don't need to use one of these drill bits, but it doesn't hurt. You can find these online and they are very affordable. After that's done, I'll then put the 2 pieces of the cartridge back together and then put it back into the main body of the carb. Now there's only really one way to put this piece back on, so don't force it if it doesn't sit flush. After that, replace the bowl and the screws, and then finally reinstall the carb back onto the engine. If you don't feel comfortable doing this repair, another option is to just replace the entire carburetor, which at the time of filming could be had for only $20. Now before installing the carburetor back onto the engine, make sure this white ring is on the back of it along with the O-ring. If it's not there, check the intake pipe on the engine and they might both be on there. Without these 2 pieces, the engine might not start, and if it does, it might have running problems. Another reason why this engine might not be starting is that the needle and seat are stuck together, not allowing any gas to enter the carburetor bowl. If this happens, try to remove the needle and clear the blockages with carb cleaner and compressed air. Otherwise, just replace the carb as it's just easier to do. To prevent this in the future, just make sure you use 100% gas, and if that's not possible, run the engine till it runs out of gas. I have seen situations where people will look into the tank and see 0 gas in it, but the line and bowl still have gas in it, and that may be enough gas to clog the jet over the wintertime. Also, when installing the air filter mounting plate, make sure to reconnect the emissions hose on the back side, otherwise the engine will draw in unfiltered air, which will cause premature engine wear. Now after taking a good portion of this engine apart, I'm quite surprised just how many plastic parts there are on this engine. The carburetor used to be metal, but is now plastic. The plastic fins on the flywheel are now a separate part that attaches to the metal flywheel, and even the recoil assembly, which used to be mostly metal, is now completely made out of plastic. I'm really surprised the deck isn't made out of plastic too. Now this part isn't a repair, but I want to flip the pull rope guide around so the rope isn't rubbing up against the handle. I don't think this would have damaged the rope, but my OCD was acting up a little bit on this one. The last thing to do is to drain the oil and replace it, paying extra attention not to overfill it. It's interesting that the oil on the dipstick looked pretty decent before, but after pouring it out, it looks a whole lot worse. Now when refilling the oil, I always use the dipstick to help fill it to level, which means it's going to take some time. Whoever filled it up last time must have been in a big hurry and ultimately put too much oil in. And since the gas we took out of the tank was perfectly fine, I'll pour that back into the tank, and after that we're going to try and start the engine. And it looks like we fixed the problem, which was a clogged jet on the carburetor. And in the future, if you plan on having someone else mow your lawn, just make sure you have them use your mower till it runs out of gas, then switch to their equipment. And if they say they can't do that, then you'll have to start the mower periodically and let it run for a few minutes until all the gas is gone. You don't have to do it all in one sitting. So my question is, what do you think about plastic parts on engines? A long time ago, most of the engine was made out of metal. Now it seems like everything that was metal is now being replaced by plastic. I'm not just talking about lawnmowers, car engines are being affected too. Personally, I don't think they want stuff to last anymore, and once it breaks, they expect you to buy another one. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.